know we love Johnny Cash. I hear the train a-comin', it's rolling around the bend. I ain't seen the sunshine since I don't know when. I'm stuck in Folsom Prison, and time keeps dragging on. But that train keeps a-rolling on down to San Antone. I fell into a burning ring of fire. I went down, 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 and the flames went higher, and it burns, burns, burns. The ring of fire, the ring of fire. Watch on this heart of mine. I keep my eyes wide open all the time. I keep the ends out for the tie that binds. Because you're mine, I walk the line. Because you're mine, I walk the line.
We are here. Welcome to The Grand at Home. I'm Joe Ferlo, the director of the Grand Oshkosh. That handsome fella next to me is James Garner. He of the James Garner's tribute to Johnny Cash. James, thanks for being with me for cocktail hour today. And you are frozen. Oh no, we have technical difficulties. Well, I'll tell you what, we'll take a quick break. I will, since we just started, I will play you a little preview of our grand opening show, the B-Twins, and we'll be back, and hopefully we can connect with James once we get through this. Be right back.
Back.
You're back, and I'm back. I moved to a whole different room, so I'm going to have to do a couple of things here to make this work. But James Garner's with us. Thank you, James. Welcome.
What happened? We broke the internet.
Clue. I have no clue, but you're here, I'm here, and I'm glad that worked. Otherwise, it was going to be a long half hour to an hour for me.
Is anybody else here? What happened? I don't know. But
people are here because what I can tell you is we have comments. Scott Hampton joins us from Visalia, California. That's a lot closer to you than it is to me.
It is. I'll tell you about Visalia later.
Yeah. So thank you, Scott, for joining in. I do want to remind folks that this is an interview show. This is an interview show, and it is interactive. And by all means, you are welcome to join us. If you have a question for James or for me, but mostly for James, jump on the screen and hit us with a comment. I'll be able to put it right up on screen, just like this. Bernie probably was very nervous that he was going to get stuck with me for an hour. I'm very glad to see you come back on. So what I did was I ran out. I was running StreamYard. These are the things you learn, right? I was running it with from the internet wireless, and I got concerned when I lost you. It usually works, so I ran into the other room, plugged in the hardline internet, and by God, you came back, and thank goodness for that.
Oh, that's good. Everything went well during the test, and then all of a sudden it was gone.
It is the way this thing works. It's the life in the digital age for when people who are supposed to be writing checks and running theaters end up engineering shows. Anything's possible.
The show must go on. It's
That's
theater.
right. So, James, tell us for the listeners who aren't familiar with you, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're coming to us from right now, and maybe a little bit about just your own personal history.
Yeah, happy to. Well, glad to be on the show. Thanks for having us for a cocktail hour. Let's see. Right now, I'm coming from our tour bus. This is where we live when we travel around, mostly on the West Coast, and do shows. And I thought, we haven't done anything in here. Last time I was getting ready for a show, it was here, and it got canceled about an hour before I pulled out. So I'm in my home near Lodi, California, which is kind of about half an hour south of Sacramento, which is the capital here. We tour around. We do our tribute to Johnny Cash, and I can't wait to talk about the things we do. Really miss it. I'll start there. I know we were scheduled to be at the Grand in April, and then we talked about later this year, and now we're talking about coming back in March, which we're really excited about. I know that we had a lot of folks that had already bought tickets for that show in April. We were only a month out before we were scheduled to be there, and I think we were pretty close to being sold out for the first show. And Joe, you and I, or my agent, were talking about adding the second show. And I think we'd even decided on that, hadn't announced it publicly yet, and of course that didn't happen. Speaking of my agent, there's Catherine right there.
Yeah, that's great. And first of all, speaking of your agent and you and the shows and everything that's been going on, one of the things, anybody who's got anything peripherally associated with wanting to see a show or wanting to do a show knows what a devastating and sudden change has happened, right, in the world of performing arts. And we're going to be one of the last ones to come back. But we will come back. And one of the things that, as we got stuck, I was canceling shows and moving them. And of course, who knows, you were out on the tour at that point. The idea of actually calling and saying, okay, let's find another date. Okay, it's going to be October. And then TikTok time goes by and it's like, maybe October's not a really good idea. Yep. Let's go for another day. Not everybody's doing that. It's one of the advantages of having a smaller theater at times like this is that the nature of the artists I'm working with, and I'm talking about you and your team, is that there's I don't want to say that a willingness, it's just easier. There are fewer moving parts to moving a show than if it was a Broadway tour, And so with that said, I am extremely grateful to you and to Catherine for all the work we've done to move this show not once but twice. And also, one of the things we're going to be dealing with is social distance seating, and that's going to be a thing. I actually have visual aids because I'm just about to announce this. So you get a sneak preview, as do the people here, right? Here's what the Grand looks like digitally, right? So 550 seats normally, and you're right, we sold almost all of them at the time we were moving things digitally. As we do social distance seating, that capacity goes to 200. So we're not removing those seats, but those seats won't be sold. And so the audience will still be spread out. They'll be 6 feet away from each other all the way around. And the bottom line is the numbers aren't kind when you go there. And the fact that you basically in the conversation, it's like, okay, we need to do 2 shows, we'll do 2. If we need to do 3, whatever. I'm there, and whatever it takes to get in front of the people will do. And that's just absolutely critical for someone in my position to keep a show that was sold out in front of people in a way that they're going to appreciate. So my hat's off to you. I know, when we met for the first time yesterday and chatted about it, it seems like a foregone conclusion. Well, of course, that's what you were going to do, because that's who you are. But there's a lot of that not happening out there right now. So I'm, on behalf of the people who are going to love the show next March, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I mean, it's a tough situation for everybody. Venues like yourself, producers, the artist. I mean, everything got turned off. I mean, on March 12th for us, it all stopped. And the paradigm that we all operated under is not coming back for a long time, years, at least a year, and if not longer. So we have to make it work. And people want to see music. We want to be out there and play music. And to me, I mean, personally, the virtual world and streaming music is all great. It's how we stay connected. But boy, there's no replacement for playing live to people and being in the audience. I love it too. So I can't wait to get back to it. It's been 4 months now. So.
You said you were on the bus where were you in the course of your tour when you got the word, and how much warning do you feel you had?
I was at home, and I was an hour away from pulling out. We were headed down to Southern California. We had a show down there on a Friday. I think it was March 13th. We had a show. We were up in Northern California before that. So I remember we were all packed up, and the Wednesday, whatever date that was, I guess the 11th, was the day the NBA canceled. Mm-hmm. And boy, when that happened, that was like, wait, what? Really? So then the dominoes started to fall pretty quickly. And I was on the phone with Catherine. We were talking with the band, but we were loaded up, ready to go to make this drive to LA to go do a show. Boy, as the day wore on, I just knew that the phone call was going to come, and we were an hour away from pulling out to go. And that was the start of, at this point, we've canceled probably 15 shows. I've stopped counting because I don't want to count anymore.
Well, it's funny because you talk about the NBA canceling, and that's when we knew something was going to happen. I was at that same time visiting with a donor in Scottsdale, Arizona, and looking forward to catching a spring training game because it's a hub. Sure. And first it was raining, the rain cleared up, and spring training was canceled, and then I'm on the phone from Arizona talking to my staff in Wisconsin. We had talked before I left because I just had a hunch that we needed to be ready, but I was pulling the trigger from long distance, and then I had to get on a plane, and of course the airports were weird and everything. Travel just became instantly weirder than it was already.
Yeah, it really was. I mean, and now that we're several months into this, you start, you miss all of it. You miss the music. You miss talking to people. I miss hearing the stories from people that come to the show and telling us about when they met Johnny Cash and what it meant to him, or what his music meant to them. And then I miss the little things like just, picking up a rental car and checking my bags in and getting on a plane and going to do music. I mean, you kind of take it for granted because it's just what you do, right? It's just, you just kind of rinse and repeat. And boy, with it all stopped, it's really bizarre. So there's light at the end of the tunnel, which is great. And that's what we're excited about.
Absolutely. So we're going to see you in the beginning of next year. Do you have an inkling of when's your next gig? Do you have something set that you're looking forward to yet?
We have a private show coming up in July. It'll be our first show back. And then after that, there's not a lot happening, and a lot of venues, and I totally get it, are there's just too much uncertainty. And even things that are on the books for later this year, I hope they hold up. We'll have to see.
Yeah, we are not alone either in that our fall is light. We're going to try a few things if the if the chips fall where they favorably, but at the same time, you just got to be ready to make things happen. And shift with whatever's going on at that point. So that's the reality of it. So let's talk about your show a little bit. So I am a fan of Johnny Cash, but I'm also a fan of certain types of tributes. I like when the music's right, and I worry less about what it looks like, But then if the attitude and the look is also there, bonus, right? Mm-hmm. So I want to talk a little bit maybe about you and the music first, because I think it's going to play wonderfully in our intimate little hall. I really do. What's your relationship to Johnny Cash? Is it something you kind of felt in you right from the start, or were you a boy soprano that suddenly became, this? How do you get from I sing to I sing Johnny Cash?
Right. Okay, it's 5:46 or out here. This will take the rest of the time. All right.
That's all right.
there's no time for other questions at this point. So, I mean, I'll go back to the beginning. For me, this is how I discovered Johnny Cash, and it was, I guess, kind of by accident. It was 1990. I was 11, I guess, and Cash was coming to play in my hometown in Hanford, California, which is down by Fresno, the Central Valley. And at the time, I didn't know who Johnny Cash was. It was something. It was a name I'd never heard in my life. And for a couple of reasons. So here we can talk about Johnny Cash too, and about his career at that time. He was 4 years past being dropped by his previous label, or his label at the time, Columbia Records. His best radio days were behind him. And really, for that matter, he didn't have a lot of radio play after, through the 80s and the 90s, and really for the rest of his career, not commercial success, that is, in terms of radio play. So I didn't know who he was. There was no internet. You didn't go on YouTube and watch something and then have a Johnny Cash recommended video over here to discover him. If you didn't see him on TV or on the radio, you didn't know who he was. And in 1990, that was kind of the state, unfortunately, of Johnny Cash's career. But he was coming to play in our hometown, and my dad went to the show. I also had a classmate whose dad was going to the show, and this classmate, his name was Jamie. He told me, he said, "Oh, this Johnny Cash guy's really cool. I just heard him." So, my interest was piqued. And one day, my mom and my brother and I, we were at a Sam Goody music store, and she told us we could pick out a tape that we wanted to hear or buy. And I knew enough that Johnny Cash was country, so I knew to go to the country section. I wanted to get a Johnny Cash tape. So I went over there and I picked out a tape. I wanted to get something that would tell me, who this guy really was. And so I got something called Giant Hits. I thought, oh, well, this will be perfect. It'll have all the giant hits of Johnny Cash. And I remember listening to the tape. We played it on the way home. The first song I heard on there was "Don't Take Your Guns to Town." And instantly, it was like, the world went from black and white to color, like in The Wizard of Oz. I was like, wow, where's this been all my life? And a good way, I'll steal a line from Rodney Crowell, who was, Johnny Cash's son-in-law at one time. He said the first time he heard Johnny Cash, it was like he grabbed him by the collar and said, "Listen up, boy." And that's how I felt, because when you hear the voice, obviously it's big. You hear, particularly that song that I heard, it's very sparse in its instrumentation. It's really just supporting the story that Johnny Cash is telling. It was 180 degrees from what I was listening to on the radio, either, popular country music, or on, the top 40, which was B95, which we listened to out of Fresno. And strangely enough, I knew who Rosanne Cash was at the time, because my mom was a Rosanne Cash fan. I had no clue Rosanne Cash, Johnny Cash were related. I didn't even know at the time I'd heard a Johnny Cash song called "Tennessee Flat Top Box" that Rosanne Cash had done, had a #1 hit with it. But my experience started that day in our car when I heard that song. And I swear I burned that tape up listening to it. I just fell in love with it. And it, I actually don't have the tape anymore. I do have the jacket. I should have got it, but I have the tape jacket from it. And I just loved it. And funny enough, too, as I listened to those songs and started studying Johnny Cash, several of the songs on that tape called Giant Hits weren't hits at all by Johnny Cash, but they were hits to me. And in fact, like City of New Orleans was a song on that tape. And, Cash's version is not the quintessential version, the version that everybody knows. It's Arlo Guthrie or Willie Nelson in country, probably. But when I hear it, it's Johnny Cash, because that's where I heard it. So it was, that's how I discovered Cash. And from then, I started this just journey of getting my hands on everything Johnny Cash, tapes and magazines. And anytime he had a television appearance, we set our VCR to record it. I didn't want to miss it. And I had at that time 30 years of catching up to do, right? It was the early 90s, so he'd already been in music for quite a long time. And wow, when all my friends were getting turned on to Smashing Pumpkins and Rage Against the Machine and Nirvana, I was like, have you heard this Johnny Cash? This guy's awesome. And they're like, what's wrong with you?
Did you find, I'm taking some guesses here. I'm guessing I'm older than you, but I'm not old enough to have caught Cash. For me, I knew the Johnny Cash of the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
But when I discovered the Johnny Cash of the 50s, I mean, that guy was smoking. It's just, did you feel like, did you layer it out and just discover him in phases, his different styles?
Yeah, I wish it was organized like that. It was all kind of a shotgun scatter approach, right? Because it was basically whatever I could find. So sometimes I would find, for example, the first time I ever heard Long Black Veil, which I would say is a Cash standard, something he did on an album called Orange Blossom Special in 64 probably or so. The first version I heard Cash doing it was something much, much later into the 80s. And then when I heard Orange Blossom Special on on that album, that version, I'm like, what is this? And it took me a while to get the years right and understand the eras. And there are different Johnny Cashes in terms of his musical career. I don't know how they exactly break up, but you have that Sun Record era from the 50s, 55 to 58. And then you have that early Columbia sound, which sounds a lot like Sun Records. And then kind of have that mid 60s where Cash is doing a lot of concept albums. And then you get into the television era, the prison albums and the television era, which I think is the Johnny Cash that a lot of people know because he was so ubiquitous in that time, right? He's on television every night. And that's how people, that's what you saw. There were 3 channels at the time, and Johnny Cash was on one of them every week for an hour. And his music was, just top of the country charts. He's crossing over to the pop charts. So he's really a household name. And I think a lot of people, I mean, it's just my theory for what it's worth, is that, when they hear Johnny Cash, I think they hear a lot of what they saw on that television show and hear on the prison albums. And then you get into the 70s Johnny Cash, and his career commercially doesn't, it starts to take kind of a different turn. He spends his time doing more conceptual things, Gospel Road. He does the film about Jesus. He starts to do more crusades with Billy Graham. And commercially, he's kind of falling out of, kind of that zenith that he was in late 60s, early 70s. And in the 80s, he kind of wanders around. And it makes me sad to talk about because I'm a fan, right? But to look back, I guess today, currently, when you look at Johnny Cash and you think, oh, man, this guy was larger than life all the time. Well, it's not true. I mean, he was obviously a huge, and it continues to be a force in music, and he always will be. But there were some years there in the 80s, particularly where he kind of wandered around commercially. He didn't get the kind of support that he felt like he needed to get at his label. He wasn't getting radio play. And, he was off playing the county fair circuit for a little bit while. And then by his own, I've read all his biographies and seen a lot of interviews, and he talks about going to Branson, almost like being put out to pasture, and he's going to go play Branson that's where people go and, end up. But then comes Rick Rubin, the American recordings, and it's this resurgence of Cash, people rediscovering him and doing, a lot of covers and things. It's just, his career's amazing. It's just, and so then you think about our show, like, how do you take all that? How do you do that in 2 hours or so? And, you can't. So you pull together a show that hits on all those eras, and plays the songs, right. Back to I think your original question was the music.
Oh, I like that long and winding road you took us on. At what point does James the fan discover that James the singer has the it's a unique range, Johnny Cash, particularly on the low end. And obviously, I'm guessing that your 11 or 12-year-old age, you probably didn't have those low notes necessarily. At what point did you kind of go, I can sing his stuff?
Because I was listening to it, and when I discovered Cash, that's all I listened to. I mean, it was just on all the time. If it was on my boombox or my Walkman, on the way to school, after school, singing in the shower, whatever, it was Johnny Cash. And so I probably, as an 11, 12-year-old, like, I want to sing like Johnny Cash. And there's no doubt about it. I mean, Cash's voice is unique. I mean, every voice is unique. There's no doubt about that. I don't particularly, I don't sound exactly like Johnny Cash. Nobody does. I try to sing in my own voice and how I know how to sing. But yeah, I mean, clearly sometime in high school, I realized, okay, well, it's kind of close. And when I think about how I sing, I guess that's how I learned to sing, because I haven't sung anything else in my life. I haven't done any other music. This is all I've ever done music wise, so I got lucky. Lucky that it's close, and at the end of the day, it's what I love. So it's just a part of me.
Well, hopefully the folks who are watching us right now caught the first 2 minutes when I played the clip. And it's a lot closer than you're giving yourself credit for. It's a wonderful, wonderful, tribute, and really enjoyable to fans. Nicole has a great question. Of course, did tell us about whether and you met Johnny Cash and how that went.
I did. Hi, Nicole. Thanks for the question. I did meet Johnny Cash. So it was shortly after I had discovered Johnny Cash. To my parents early on, it was like, okay, Johnny Cash to you is how Elvis was to them, or the Beatles, or, I discovered it in my wonder years. So it's what I loved. And so Cash was coming to play in Fresno. This would have been 1992. Excuse me. And so my mom got me tickets for my birthday. We went to the show. It was at the Tower Theater. We sat in the second row off to the right. It was amazing. I loved it. I mean, it was the first concert I'd ever been to. And so seeing Johnny Cash was amazing. I sang every song, probably to the annoyance of the people around me. And when the show, and I just loved the show. It was Johnny Cash and the Tennessee Three, and June was on the show. It was just magical, as a fan. So when the show was over, we ran around the back of the theater to see if we could get a glimpse of him. And we had seen his tour bus parked behind the theater. So we ran around there, and we got to the tour bus, and Cash had gotten onto the first step of the bus there, and they had a security guard, but he let us go talk to him real quick, just say hi, and we did. And here was Johnny Cash. I'm actually seated at the front of our little bus here, and he was standing up here real tall. He's looking down at me. I'm looking up at him. I was so nervous. And my voice got really high. Really, I was so nervous. I said, I'm your biggest fan. And he said, well, glad to know you. And we shook hands, and And then I told him just because I was so nervous, but I wanted to tell him that I love his music so much that I was learning all of his songs. I was learning to play the guitar at that time, listening to his songs. And I told him, I said, I can sing just like you. And my voice is cracking. And I mean, I sound like Tiny Tim trying to, talk to Johnny Cash. And he said, oh, I'm sure you can. And it was just really special. We shook hands, and I remember driving home, like, it was just one of these things. I'm 11 or 12 or something, 13. And I'm just like, oh, I'm never going to wash my hand again. And it was awesome. It was just awesome, and he put on a great show. At the time, he would have been 60. And boy, he just put on a great show. I really loved it.
On the road, as you started to formulate a career, has it always been James Garner's tribute to Johnny Cash?
Yep. That's all we've done. And it's all I want to do. Folks ask about, well, you could sing Elvis, and I can't. I mean, I don't have a voice like Elvis, and I like Elvis just fine, but I don't love Elvis like I love Johnny Cash. I don't particularly love any other music like the Johnny Cash music. So this is all I've ever done. And folks have asked, well, is this, what will you do next? And the answer is there is no next. This is it. I love Johnny Cash, and I want to keep bringing the live music of Johnny Cash and the story of Johnny Cash to people. That's just what I love to do. It's just in me. And I guess my guitar player told me one time, he said, you have limited ambition. And I guess I do. That's all I want to do.
But that's one of the cool things about, and you're going to have to take my word for it for another 6 months, but playing in a hall like the Grand, it's so intimate, and the way the audience wraps around you, and it feels that, it's going to be even more intimate with 200 people. But it's kind of like being in the living room performing for people. I've had artists tell me that. And so for me as the presenter, having an artist who loves doing what they do, that actually translates, it translates in the work, and it makes the whole audience experience live that much better.
I'm glad to hear that. I mean, one of the things we do too in our show we have talked about is, we play the music obviously, but there's a lot of storytelling in our show that accompanies the songs about, Cash himself, what was going on in his career, the song we're actually going to do, who wrote it and how it came about. And to me, it just lends itself nice to any size audience, but we're going to have 200 people. That's great. I mean, we've done everything from, dozens of people to thousands of people.
You know what? We'll do 200 people 4 times. That'll be all right. That'll be just fine.
That sounds awesome. I'm glad to do it.
Let's talk about your band. The folks who are on the road with you. They've been with you. How long have you been together as a unit? And because you can tell from the clips, you guys are pretty tight. You're pretty comfortable, and you got the style. Have you been together long?
Yeah, a long time. Back to your original question of the music. That's super important to us. Is getting it right and playing it the way Cash did. Not like, oh, here's our take on it. Here's our interpretation. It doesn't need to be interpreted. It was perfect when it was done. So let's try to use the right gear. Let's try to listen to these, and we do. I would say try to get close to the live sound of Johnny Cash. So the band is great. I mean, they're fantastic guys. They're great musicians. Just really blessed to work with all of them. This goes back. We started in 2007. Denny, the guitar player, Denny Colleray, he's been with me since day one, since first time I ever walked out on any stage, Denny was there. And so he's been there since day one. Rick Duncan is our bass player. Rick's been there very early on, probably 2009. And Rick's a fantastic bass player. And then Nick Oriemo is our drummer. And he has, he came on board in 2012. So, we're 8 years. So it's just great. a lot of traveling shows will swap out musicians, right, and pick up folks. And I guess I'm spoiled, but it's also important to me that this is the show. It's not, 'cause, folks will say, well, James, you just come and we'll find someone to back you up. And I'm not interested in that.
Mhm.
This show, it's all of us. And that goes down to, our engineer, Jeff Fry. I mean, he's an amazing engineer. He's been with me just about as long, almost from the very beginning. And he's been at the board almost every show I've done, over 500 at this point. So that just gives you a lot of confidence.
Sure. Here's a good question talking about the shows. Are tickets currently available? And the answer is no. But here's why. As I mentioned earlier, we're just finishing up what the seating chart's going to look like, what social seating is going to look like, and where it's going to go from there. And then when that happens, which is, as you can see, done, the next step is to take the folks who had tickets for your original show in April and make sure that they have moved to a show of their choice of the 3 or 4 that we're going to put into next year, getting them into seats, because it's quite possible that the seat that they had, it's not like, hey, your ticket's still good. The seat
Right.
may be gone, physically gone from the theater at that point and not available. So the idea is to try to get all of that together and taken care of. And our box office has been working behind the scenes to get that done. It's my hope that we will put the tickets on sale again shortly after the 4th of July. And we'll sell the 200 seating chart, and then if the fates allow for us to add seats by March of next year, we will. But it'll be a lot easier to add seats than to remove seats. So we'll look to sell out 4 small shows. They'll go on sale sometime in July. And the best advice I can give you, Nicole, is to stay tuned. And I'm going to get the word out just as quick as I can, just as soon as we get it settled. Becky,
we could stay all week. We could do a show. I could stay all month. We'll do a show a night for a month.
You know what? Catherine's on the. I know she's watching, and right now she just did a spit take with whatever she was sipping. But I appreciate that, and we'll
Shut up, James.
we'll get it done. Becky has an interesting question. We talked about you meeting Johnny Cash, but has any of Cash's family seen you do the tribute? Maybe this is a good place to segue into some of the work you do with the estate.
Yeah, well, we don't do any work with the estate at all. I mean, we're not, we don't have any kind of relationship with the estate. But I mean, to answer the question, yes, the short answer is yes. And gosh, I'll go back here. It was probably, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago. I met Tara Cash at a movie screening about the Carter family up in Portland. And Tara is the youngest daughter of Johnny Cash and Vivian Liberto Cash, Johnny Cash's first wife. They had 4 daughters, Roseanne, Kathy, Cindy, and Tara. She was the youngest. And so we met there, and we stayed in contact. And, she knows that I do the show, and we have this traveling show about her father. And we swapped notes. And then in 2018, we were doing a 50th anniversary show in Folsom up at the Harris Center on January 13th, which to the day was the 50-year anniversary to celebrate Johnny Cash at Folsom Prison. So we were doing it in the city of Folsom. And I thought, well, this is very special. We'd like to do, kind of a different kind of show, one that featured the songs from Folsom, from the album, as well as let's try to get some special guests on the show. And so my first call was to Tara, and told her the idea, and she said, yeah, I'd love to be on the show. So she came down. We had 2 other guests on the show, Gene Bealey and Dan Pausch, who were actually with Johnny Cash at the show in Folsom Prison in 1968. They worked for the newspaper in Ventura where Cash lived and the family lived. And they covered the story, or covered the concert for their paper, 1968. But anyway, back to Tara. She said, yes, I would love to. And boy, I tell you, she was so gracious to be part of this entire project. Because number one, it's personal. You're talking about her dad, and so we wanted to be respectful of, and which is how we approach everything all the time. But what did she want to do? And so we talked about kind of what the show might look like, and we decided that we would do kind of a Q&A during the show. We would stop the music, bring Tara out, and kind of we sat down and we talked. We talked about her dad, Johnny Cash. We talked about growing up with Johnny Cash as a father. We talked about her mother. We talked about June. We talked about life on the road, because she toured with her dad in the late 70s and 80s. And she was so gracious. She opened up her family photo album. We had, pictures on the screen. I mean, pictures no one had ever seen other than the Cash family. These were personal photos. And it was just incredibly special. I mean, for me, I was, oh my gosh, I was blown away. I was nerding out, of course, as a Johnny Cash fan. But, we did 2 nights. We were sold out both nights, so 850 people each night. So for those 1,700 people, they had an experience that, and saw things and heard stories that, mostly nobody else has. And it was incredible. And then Tara's idea was, well, let's sing a song. So we sang a song together. She picked it. It was I Still Miss Someone. So that was very, very special. And since then, she's come and seen us another time up in Washington State. So just a wonderful family. She and her husband, Fred, and her 2 boys, they've just great people. So and just one final note on that. I mean, when we were at our show in Washington, we introduced her. And so after the show, people would go up and talk to her and you ask questions. And, I remember someone asked, well, what do you think of this, this Johnny Cash tribute? And I was right there. She's all, well, it's all very weird. I mean, but she said it in a loving tone. We all laughed, she's because it's about my dad, and that's what he was a person just like the rest of us. And he was the dad to 5 children, it's been great. So I'm really thankful for, to have, to have done the show with Tara and have her be so nice. So
apparently your agent is still talking to you. They weigh in and say hello. Catherine. And
hi, David. Oh.
So let me ask you this then. What is your this is like the we're creeping down the hour now. What's your favorite song to listen to of Johnny's, and your favorite song to perform? And they might not necessarily be the same.
No, they're not. And I don't have an easy answer because it kind of strikes me on the day, right? What I'm listening to. In fact, I'll show you. I'm coming back. I'm coming back. I promise.
That's good because I'm flat out of jokes.
No, I'm back. So, like I said, I'm in our motorhome, our tour bus. And when we drive, I have this whole collection here. As you can see, it's had better days. I have a piece of tape on it here. But I have my Johnny Cash collection here, and it's all his Columbia records, right? So there's like, I don't know, 60 some. So whatever I'm listening to that day is my favorite, right? And whatever album I'm on. And I just find myself, really digging particular songs. Like for me to listen to, I have an affinity for really all of it. I mean, it's so hard to pick things, but one that comes to mind is I listened to the album Pa Österreicher, which was a live prison concert in Sweden that Cash recorded. And I'm trying to think if it was released in real time or if it was released later. But it's boy, a great sound of Johnny Cash and the band. It's Bob and Marshall and WS and Carl Perkins. Oh boy, they just sound great. I mean, to my ear, I love it. And so I find myself listening to, Me and Bobby McGee, which, is a Chris Christopherson song, and Janis Joplin, but a Christopherson song. And I just like listening to that song. Or it just depends. I've been listening to John R. Cash, that album, which was probably 1974. And that's an album where the Johnny Cash sound is gone. They did everything in LA. They hired studio musicians, kind of the A list. James Burton is on it. Ry Cooder, I think, plays on that album. I find myself listening to songs there and I'm like, oh, I really like this song. The Lady Came from Baltimore hits me sometimes. Or then I throw in like Rusty Cage, which is a song off of Unchained. I guess it depends on the day what I like listening to. But I will say, if you pin me down, I find myself gravitating back to, the early 70s, the late 60s, the television show era. I just really like that lineup. I mean, the Holy Land is, I'm sorry, now I'm thinking all these songs, but the Holy Land was an album, 1968. It was the next album after Johnny Cash Live at Folsom Prison. It was the last album that Luther Perkins played on, which was his guitar player. He died in August of 68, tragically in a house fire. And Luther just sounds great. He's not real present on the album, but where he is, he sounds great. And Carl is on the album, Carl Perkins, and just I love their sound together. So that's my answer to that. What I like to play, well, I love all the songs we do. For me, I particularly love Singing Sunday Morning Coming Down. I just think it's a wonderful song. Again, back to Chris Christopherson. It's a Christopherson penned tune. I really love that song. I like doing Rock Island Line. It's an old song from, probably the 20s. I love Cash's version, and I think like when we're doing the song, I just can listen to Cash's version and him doing that rhythm guitar. I mean, just chunking away on that rhythm guitar, and it never misses a beat. He's driving the band in that song, and it's just fantastic. So I love them all. I guess that's what comes to mind. So,
James, do you have family? Do you have kids, and are they digging Johnny Cash as well?
Yeah, I do. So I'm married, and we have 2 kids, Jeff and Carly. Jeff just turned 11 last week. Carly's 8. They both play piano. They've listened to a lot of Johnny Cash, and so Carly, she's in Taylor Swift mode now. That's what she loves. And Jeff, Jeff, I wouldn't say Jeff is into a particular artist right now, but he does like Johnny Cash. In fact, he was on our show one time. We did a Christmas show, and we came out and we sang Jingle Bells and Christmas Time's a Comin', and he plays the piano. So they do like Johnny Cash. They know the songs, and I mean, Jeff started playing the drums when he was very young, like 2. We had a little toy drum set, and he's kind of elevated up. But one of the first songs he was playing on the drums, I remember, it was Sunday Morning Coming Down. And, it's a song that he knew all the words to by the time he was probably 3 or 4. And I'm like, great, we're going to send this kid to kindergarten. He's going to sing, Wishing Lord I Was Stoned. And I'm like, they're going to call CPS on us. So that was, but now they do like Johnny Cash. And my wife, I mean, bless her heart, because that's she's listened to a lot of Johnny Cash over the years.
I've been trying to formulate a question, and I can't quite get it right. But as a recovered performer, I know what I want to ask. Is it different? I mean, there are times when you're performing at any time, you are performing and you get that emotion, that feedback back from the audience, and you go, okay, that's cool. That's great. You've got recognizable tunes to the point where the guitar riff might start, and the audience is going to react. There's going to be possibly an audible reaction. And I guess my question is, do you feel that as an artist, even though they're basically loving Johnny Cash with you?
Mm-hmm. I do, and it's weird, honestly. Well, and one, you got to understand that it's not for us. It's not for me, for any of the band. It's Johnny Cash. They love Johnny Cash. So when you start I Walk the Line, it's da 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 da. They know it, and they might start clapping, or you sing the first verse to a particular song, and It's not for us. It's for a love of Johnny Cash, but you do feed off of that. I mean, it does mean something. It's special, but that's how I've always treated this, is like, you know, I still think of myself as a kid on his way to school in the 7th grade with my Walkman on and listening to, a boy named Sue. And I'm just going to share that with people. That's all we want to do. I love it. And that's very, like Lenore here saying, love your music. And it's not my music, it's Johnny Cash, obviously. I mean, we just, thank you, Lenore. We just want to bring that to people. And, it makes me sad, because Cash obviously isn't with us anymore. You can't go and see Johnny Cash live. So we want to give the experience audibly, at least, and getting the music right, that when just, a little story here is, we are such like, cashophiles, if that's, I'm making up a word here, but, or cash files, I guess you would say, that, Denny, our guitar player, plays the first go around in Folsom Prison Blues. Folsom Prison Blues has 2 leads. He plays the first lead in the style of Luther Perkins, which was Cash's original guitar player. And he plays the next lead. It's the same lead, but he plays the next time he plays it in the style of Bob Wooten, who would go on to be Cash's guitar player, till the end, 1968 to the end. And, as a Cash file, as a nerd, I'm like, oh, I love this, and I hear it on stage, right? I love it. I'm like, oh, that's okay. That's a Luther lead. And then here comes the Bob lead. Mm-hmm. They're the same notes, but there's some different accents that's happening. And it's just, that's what I love. Yeah. And to bring that to people, just is something that's important and blessed to do. And I hope we all get to go back and do it again here pretty soon.
Really? Well, as soon as you said that it was the applause or the reactions for Johnny Cash, here come a couple of reactions saying, no, it's you too. It's you too. So I think, here's the thing. I think that honesty in presentation and is meaningful. I've been lucky in my presenting career to find artists who do tributes to X, Y, or Z, and now you with Johnny Cash. And in each of them, they have a personal story or a personal reason why it's so special to them. And they don't have to make the music special for the audience because the music is special to them. And all they have to do is be themselves and be genuine. And it happens. And I can tell you, we've known each other for 24 hours, just about. But when I made the commitment to bring you in, which is now like 2 years ago, it was, of course, it was the sound, and of course, it was the music, but it was the genuineness of what. What's I don't know. You need it validated by some guy in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, but it's I'm glad. Thank you. That'll get you through the next couple of months of sitting at home.
I know. No, I do appreciate that, because that is what's important to us. Never since day one. And when we thought about this, my early background was in education, and I kind of always thought about this show like that it would be in somewhat of an obviously entertaining, but an educational experience where we're going to tell stories about Johnny Cash. Day one, the first gig we ever did, I remember telling stories, and it was a place that wasn't going to fit really, right? But right. I'm doing it because that's what I love, right? And I always saw it as kind of an educational piece, to let people know about Johnny Cash beyond the music. And never from day one did we ever come out I come out and say, well, hello, I'm Johnny Cash. It's never crossed my lips. I mean, except for telling you right now, but
Mhm.
not on show. I mean, that's not our show. We don't, say, don't pretend to be Johnny Cash, and I did this when, 1958. And no, that's just not me. I mean, yes, I wear black and, put my hair up, but, I just, I look at it through kind of the eyes of a fan. I mean, that's what I am. And, we just want to bring that music to other folks. So,
But in that, your opening, which I made sure I had on my video, hello, we love Johnny Cash. That works.
yeah,
It
that's
works.
how we start the show.
And in just those few words, you get the sense of what you are and what you are not. But then the music starts, and you're like, okay, they've got this. They've got this. Let's sit back and have a good time. So, all of that said, we're running up to the bottom of the hour, and I'm delighted that folks have been engaging us along the way. But for the people who tune in after the fact, wait a minute though, we got to go here. Here's someone who's looking forward to seeing you somewhere else. Thanks, Scott, for that plug for Visalia.
And I told you this is great closure. We'll go back to the beginning, because Visalia came up earlier. Visalia was where I bought that Johnny Cash tape.
See,
it was in Visalia.
It all comes full circle. What in a nutshell, I mean, we've pretty well said this. So if it sounds like rehash, I just want to put a button on our time together. What's the show going to be like for someone who loves Johnny Cash? What are they going to experience when they come see us in March? And then I say hello, and I get the heck out and point out all the exits and the face masks and the whatever's along the way. And then they get out of the way, and it's you. What are they going to? What's the night going to be like for them?
No, I say the sound. I go back to, again, your original question about the music. The sound is critical, and playing the songs the way they remember hearing them. That's that for a fan of Johnny Cash. I think people appreciate that. And if you go a step further, I mean, to harken back to my little story about Denny playing the leads different. If you're really a fan, you might notice that. If you're really a fan, you might notice that our bass player plays an Epiphone bass, a Newport bass, like Marshall Grant played with Cash when he went electric in the mid 60s. That's on the Folsom album. That's on the San Quentin album. That was on the television show, the same model. You might recognize that. You would recognize the drum rolls that our drummer Nick does in the style of W.S. Holland, whose playing style is definitely unique compared to any other drummer out there. But Nick does that. So I think musically, you would hear that, you'd recognize that. And then for the stories in the songs, not in the songs, but the stories around the songs that we tell, I think what I find people experiencing is they lived it, right? They went and saw Johnny Cash in 1958, in 1962, and 1975, and so when we talk about that era, it's taking them back to their military service, their first date, but their boyfriend, whatever's going on in their life at that time, and that's real special, I think. So that's what people, I think, Johnny Cash fans take away. And then also, even for Cash fans, there's a lot of things that we throw into the show. I mean, history-wise and song-wise too, that are surprises for people. Like, I didn't even know that about Johnny Cash. I didn't know his connection to Bob Dylan or Joni Mitchell or Steve Goodman, or that he even covered these songs, or that he played with these people. So that's neat too. I love that. I love that. Goes back to that education of people, learning about Johnny Cash, because I guess most people do know about Johnny Cash, and it's kind of the mythological Johnny Cash, right? The brooding figure dressed in black and scowling, and but there's so much more than just that, so much more.
Well, this has been delightful, James. Thanks so much. I'm looking forward to it, and maybe we'll get a chance to visit once or twice between now and your time here in April. For the folks who have enjoyed it, they can find you. Can they find you on Facebook? Where can they, if they want to follow along?
Yeah.
Is that the best place to do it?
Yeah, we're on Facebook. It's a Johnny Cash Tribute Show. We're on Twitter. We're on Instagram. Our website's cashtribute.net. We have a mailing list. If you want to sign up for our email list, we send out news about the shows, where we're going to be, and also share news about Johnny Cash. I love to just share Johnny Cash news, so.
No, I think that's great. So, well, thanks again for taking the time to spend it with us today. Sure appreciate it. This is James Garner, of course. We're going to see him in April here at the Grand April. I put it up like 3 times. You were coming in April. You are coming in March.
March through April 2021.
That's right. That's right. You're saying a month, right?
That's right. I'm a permanent resident.
You take care of yourself, and we'll look forward to seeing you in the spring.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks for hosting this.